the National Energy Regulator of South Africa has decided on a 9.61% Eskom tariff increase for the 2022-23 financial year. The power utility had asked for a 20.5%, arguing that cost increases were driven by factors out of its control. Opposition parties obviously reacting to this. They've slammed the hike, saying South Africans are already struggling with the high cost of living in this country. Let's make sense of it all for you now. Bring in energy expert Clyde Mallinson, who joins us via our video link. Clyde, it's great to see you on this Friday morning. Thanks once again for making time for the AM report. It really shouldn't be lost to us that what Eskom was asking for here is actually 20.5%. And part of the reasons for that were largely twofold. They say they have to cover costs from increases in carbon taxes and also have to start buying energy from PPPs, essentially private producers. Given the fact that they didn't get this 20%, do you reckon they'll be able to solve at least those problems?
Morning, yeah. So I actually presented at the NERSA hearings where Eskom was making this application. And I called on NERSA to make what I refer to as a pro-poor decision. I said that there shouldn't be an increase exceeding CPI or inflation. And in fact, if possible, it should be lower than inflation. But I couched that particular term in a very specific way, and I said that we need to move this decision and the problems over Eskom back into the policy arena. So we can't have every year have Eskom needing more, NERSA giving less, and then government having to bail them out further. So my solution or suggestion was that they get given less than they actually need. They therefore put pressure on government, because government now will have to inject further finance into Eskom. And because it's hurting government, they will start looking more seriously at policy on how to fix this thing. So that was the intention.
Interesting you say that, because history suggests a different reality, right? I mean, government has always been paying bailouts to Eskom. It doesn't seem to have hurt it enough to move to any kind of policy change. So I guess the question becomes, what makes things different this time around?
Well, it's really hurting now. When you're in debt, as it were, and then you've maxed out your credit cards, there comes a time when you say it's time for action. And it's interesting that the Minister of Finance actually spoke about Eskom reducing staff numbers. Now, my understanding in the past has been that it's been absolutely a political situation where Eskom has not been allowed, if you like, to reduce staff numbers. They've done it through natural attrition. But there was actually a call, if I read the article correctly, for a reduction of perhaps as many as 10,000 staff members. And there's also calls once again for Eskom to sell off any of its assets. And in fact, they included some of the coal-fired power stations for sale as assets. And I would question that particular advice, because I would regard many of the coal power fire stations as liabilities at this point in time, and it's not easy to sell liabilities. But also talking about Eskom selling off some of its distribution business.
Sure.
So he was kind of making it conditional. He was saying, we'll give you further bailouts if you reduce staff, sell off some of your assets, tighten your belt further.
Yeah, in fact, he spoke about tough love towards some SOEs in this country. I think that's the direct term that he used there. But I mean, speak to us a bit more, if you can, Clyde, about these policy changes that you're alluding to. Is that what you also had in mind, essentially reducing the staff burden at Eskom, selling off some assets? Is that the way forward, you reckon, to try and make up for what it seemed Eskom is trying to recoup ultimately from consumers?
No, the way forward is to have had policy that would have allowed us to move quickly to replace our reducing generation capacity. We really needed to, the opportunity that was granted during the risk mitigation program, or the so-called emergency procurement, was an opportunity to basically unleash large quantities of new generation facility in the country that would have then allowed Eskom to start retiring or managing what was left of the coal fleet. And that just didn't happen. the risk mitigation or emergency procurement started 2 years ago, the concept, and we're now 2 years down the line and we haven't procured anything. So there really needed to be treated as an emergency. The economic system, if you like, is short of blood or short of electricity. And we need a blood transfusion or an electricity infusion into the economy. And instead, we've been focusing on trying to build a bigger heart for the country. Now, you and I know that if your heart was bigger but you didn't have enough blood in the system, it wouldn't help you one little bit. So we really need to, I don't want to use the word embrace, we really need to recognize that we're deep in crisis and we need to be building new resources as if our lives and livelihoods depended on it.
Yeah.
And that basically will be the way out. We can't regulate during a disruption. I mean, we can try, but we're trying to regulate a disruption and regulate a change in the whole global energy supply industry. And you can't say when digital cameras are taking over from Kodak cameras, you can't try and regulate that change. It happens, and it happens rapidly.
Sure.
But you can put policies in place if you recognize that that change is actually occurring.
Yeah. As you can expect, I mean, there's been reaction to this increase from various sectors of society, including politicians, who are worried about the burden this will add on already over-indebted South Africans. A lot of talk around this 9.6% being the hike, but what's the real impact on consumers come the 1st of April, at least those who are direct customers to Eskom?
Well, it will be, let's call it 10%. I mean, the notion of having it to 2 decimal places is always slightly amusing, but I guess if you run the numbers and you come up, the actual increase that NERSA awarded was, I think, less than 3%.
Yeah.
And the other 6 or so percent was an award from a previous year where they had agreed that they hadn't paid Eskom enough. So, in fact, the sort of ongoing, if you like, increase is lower than inflation, but then it's had a dollop of a rear increase, if you like, a once-off increase put into it. But for you and me, it's 10%. So whatever we're paying at the moment or not paying at the moment, we will be charged an additional 10%. And on top of all of the other increases, so it doesn't help to not make Eskom viable, have these lower increases, and then expect that we won't have to put money in through Treasury. So Eskom will need support by other means, but we need to have a coherent plan so that Eskom, in fact, the best thing probably would be to relieve Eskom of its debt and then put it on terms and say, here's what we're looking to do. In 10 years' time, we would like the electricity price to have decreased by 50% from the current trajectory. Right. That's the challenge. And it's possible.
Sure. Yeah, I guess you're a whole lot more optimistic than some. But, I mean, a quick correction. So that 9.6%, you're right, is split into 2, but the increase for this year is actually at 3.49%, and the rest is what they're describing as a legacy decision to make up for previous years, so I imagine, where Eskom was due some kind of rise in the rate. But thanks for your time nonetheless. Really do appreciate it. Energy expert there, Clyde Mallinson, joining us via our video link. Appreciate your insight.